Welcome to our first day of our week of action. We are going to be having one of these day of action events Monday through Thursday of this week. Our Food Security Coalition is happening today, as all of you know. Tomorrow, we will be talking about criminal justice. On Wednesday, our Affordable Housing Coalition is meeting. And then on Thursday, we'll be focusing on our HIV justice work. So I am hopeful that you may be able to join us for one of our other day of action events that are happening at the same time, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So we have a jam-packed agenda today. We will have you in and out of here in 1 hour. But as you can see, we have a lot of things that we want to cover with you today. We're going to talk a little bit about ways that you can become a stronger and more effective advocate. We're going to talk a little bit about some timely legislation that is moving through the state legislature right now. And we will have an opportunity for each of you to do some advocacy on your own related to that bill. So like I said, I'm just going to start off by the first thing on our agenda is just mention a little bit about Empower Missouri if you're not aware of who we are. We were founded in 1901, so we've been around for quite a long time in the state of Missouri. We are a statewide nonprofit organization, and we work to, I apologize. We work to secure basic human needs and equal justice for every person in our state through coalition building and advocacy. And we do that on the 4 issue areas that I mentioned earlier in the presentation: food security, criminal justice, affordable housing, and then HIV justice. And today we are going to be focusing on our Food Security Coalition work, and specifically on a few bills that have been introduced in the legislature for a few years now. But so far, advocates and key legislators have been able to stop it from crossing the finish line. And of course, it's back again this year in a House bill as well as a Senate bill. We have some strong advocacy ahead of us for these next few weeks, and we're hopeful that we can stop it from getting to the finish line yet again here in 2021. So what these 2 bills would do, House Bill 217 and Senate Bill 138, is that they would increase the rules and the requirements for work hours and work tracking to access the SNAP program. It also increases the sanctions for not complying with those new rules. The Senate bill is sponsored by a senator named Rick Bratton. The House bill is sponsored by a state representative named Chad Perkins. The Senate bill is currently in line and on the calendar to be heard on the full floor of the Senate. It's really close to the top of that calendar list. So this is a timely hour of action right now. That bill could be brought up to the Senate floor at any time. So that is going to be our main focus for our advocacy efforts through this hour of action today. So that's Senate Bill 138. So before I launch into some of the specifics about that Senate bill specifically, we're going to take a little bit of time to kind of take a step back and do some focusing on just being an advocate in general. We're hoping to weave some of that work throughout the entire week. So we hope that you can kind of build on that if you join us for Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So at the end of the week, that you'll be a more confident and effective and skilled advocate in the process of learning some specifics on legislation. So today we're going to talk a little bit about just finding that passion that you have, finding that issue area, finding that topic that you want to really spend your time advocating on. And I say that because social justice folks, I mean, you and I alike, there's a lot of things that we care about. We could spend a lot of time on a lot of different things, but to really be the most effective advocate that we can be and have a reduced chance of burnout and to be effective in our advocacy efforts, we really need to choose a few issues that we really want to focus on and are that of the highest importance for us. And so I say that again, that it's really important to pare down what you really want to focus on, not only for you personally, but for the effectiveness of the advocacy that you're going to do. So if you try to advocate for everything, you're going to burn out, right? There are so many issues that are in need, especially in the state of Missouri right now, that we could work on and try to make our lives and the state of Missouri a better place to live. But it's really just too much for a single person to focus on. And secondly, if you try to advocate on everything, it's going to dilute your effectiveness, and ultimately you're not going to be listened to. So for example, as you may or may not know, in the time of COVID, they have made some rule changes through the state legislature that allows you to submit testimony online, right? Which has been fabulous. It's allowed a lot more people to put their voice into the process. But for an example of diluting your voice, there's a person that I know that is involved in some politics stuff out here in St. Charles, where I live. And pretty much for every issue that I've clicked on over the last few months to see who has testified, because they have a written log of who that is, this person has submitted testimony for every bill in every committee that has come up in the legislature this session. And I can pretty much guarantee you that no legislator on any one of the committees gives any weight to the testimony that he submits, because his name is literally listed in every one for every committee. So I say that to mean that, on the other hand, if you have one issue that you care about, if you submit testimony or go and testify on that bill with passion from your heart, speaking about it passionately, that testimony is going to carry an immense amount more weight than someone who just submits testimony every time for every committee for every bill. So then you got to figure out, what is your passion, right? How do you decide what you're going to focus on? And that really is personal. So you really need to spend some time reflecting and journaling about the things and the people that you care most about. And it's during that reflection time that you really begin to see what is important to you. And once you get that probably laundry list of things, it's vitally important to begin to rank them. I mean, if you go through the list and they all are 5s, you've done something wrong. You really need to get to a point where you can pick 1, 2, or even 3 things that you can focus on and begin to really understand and articulate in a really well thought out way. And so once you do that and begin to start digging into those things, a best way and a best practice to kind of learn more about them is, I think, joining a group like Empower Missouri or NAMI or Jobs with Justice, because they're all working on these issues and they can really help you hone your talking points, hone your elevator pitch on that, and guide you with the most amount of information and available action steps on those. And so then how do you do that, right? So once you know your issue and you know the talking points, you really need to figure out how is the best and most effective way to have an impact. And what we do at Empower Missouri is advocacy on the state level, right? Learning the state legislative process. There is action and advocacy that can happen at all levels of government, local all the way up to the federal. But Empower Missouri does most of its advocacy work on the state legislative process. And so that is going to be 2 of the issues, learning the legislative process and how to best connect with your legislator. We'll be delving into that a little bit more on Tuesday and Wednesday in our hour of action. So I highly encourage you to come back to learn more about that. But I do want to touch on just a few key points in that will help us in our advocacy on our food security issue that we're going to talk about a little bit later. So you really first need to learn and understand the legislative process, right? That is the best way to connect with your legislators in the most appropriate way and the most timely way. And so one of the first things I always say when I talk to groups is really think about that Schoolhouse Rock video that you probably all saw in grade school of how a bill becomes a law. The song is stuck in my head all the time when I'm doing this work. But really is a long process, right? There is a lot of steps before a bill is filed to a bill is officially signed into law. And in that long process, there are a lot of steps to finalizing that process. And there's a lot of ways that advocacy can happen in each of those steps. And just a few short kind of pieces to note on that. So at the beginning, a bill can be filed in one chamber, either the House of Representatives or the Senate, or it can be filed in both chambers. And that's where our bill is that we're working on. It was filed pretty much the same bill in both the House and the Senate. And it's going to move through the process in both of those chambers in a very similar way. And once it's filed, the next step is it is assigned to a smaller group of legislators, what they call a committee. And that place is one of the best places where advocates can really make their voices heard. Because it not only narrows down the amount of legislators that you can focus on, right? The 6, 7, or 8 legislators that are on that committee. It's also the only time in the process of a bill becoming a law that public testimony can be taken, where they actually meet and they listen to the members of the public share their concerns or their affirmations about a bill. And so the bill we're talking about today has actually already passed committees in both the House and the Senate. So the next step on our bills that we're talking about today is it's going to go before the full House or the full Senate to be voted on. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. And that's another important piece in the advocacy process, right? And once it gets to the floor of the House or the Senate, that is when it's really vital for you to contact your own state representative or your own senator. Even if I'm sure many of you are thinking, my senator is already against this bill. They already have their opinion made and they would never vote for something like this. It is also a vital and important piece to let them know that you also are against this sort of a bill. So even if they're on your same side of an issue, we really want you to call their offices today and let them know that you also are against this. And we really hope that they will stand up on the floor of the Senate and speak out against it. So when these legislators hear from their constituents and they support their position, it just gives them that much more ammunition to stand up on the floor of the Senate and say, I had 30 constituents call me today and tell me that they were against this bill. So I'm going to stand here on the Senate floor today and tell you that I am against this bill and we should not pass it through the Senate. So even if your senator agrees with you, you need to contact them and let them know that. It's important. So like I said, the 2 bills we're focusing on today, Missouri has been fighting against for quite a few years now. The reasons that these bills have been brought up initially, I would say there's a lot of misconceptions that there's fraud and abuse within the SNAP program, right? There has been data and research that's proven time and time again that there is no more fraud and abuse in this system as there are in any other government program or tax credit or tax program or any other government funded program that's out there. And that's why this bill keeps getting brought up time and time again to stop that fraud and abuse that's running rampant in the program, which has been proven that is non-existent. So I'm going to go back through the basics one more time, and then we'll launch into the talking points that I'm hopeful that you all can share with the senators that you're calling today. So as I said, those are the 2 bill numbers, House Bill 217 and Senate Bill 138. The titles of the bill says it modifies work requirements for participants in the SNAP program. So if you're new to this work, the SNAP program is a program that's for individuals and for families who fall below a certain income threshold and meet other certain requirements. And once they qualify, they will have access to a certain amount of money that's put on like a debit-like card that they can use for unprepared food at grocery stores and convenience stores and some farmers markets. And so this is the basics, right? We work really closely with Legal Services of Eastern Missouri. They're a partner of ours, and they are fabulous attorneys that do a lot of policy work. And they have put together this amazing policy report on these bills for us. And I'm gonna have one of my coworkers put a link to their report in the chat. It is very detailed. It gives you lots of amazing information about these bills that's more in a report sort of a form. So hopefully you can get to that link and you'll be able to read that report and just learn a lot more about the background and the impact of these bills. But what I'm going to talk about today are a little bit more kind of just quick talking points of what you can share with the legislator in a little bit more bulleted format. But that is an amazing policy report that was put out on these bills that I wanted to share with you. So as I said, we're going to focus on the Senate, and we're going to focus on what's happening with Senate Bill 138. So these are about 5 talking points that we have used in the past to explain why we think that this bill is bad, and bad for many different reasons. So the first bullet point it talks about is that it would increase sanctions for not properly documenting your work hours. So the first bullet point I'd say is that I say increases the sanctions because there's already work requirements for accessing SNAP. And there's already time limits for being on SNAP for certain populations, for people who are able to work who don't have children. There are already strict time limits for accessing the program if you're in that population. So for example, to access SNAP, and if you're not exempt, you already have to register for work, and you already have to provide information to the department regarding your employment status. And another talking point on that work aspect is that data has shown time and time again that people who can work are working. People who are exempt from the program, exempt from having to work, make up a large majority of the folks who are on SNAP. So kids and senior citizens and people who are disabled, they don't have to work. But if someone is able to work and can work, many of them are already working, but are making such a low amount of money in their work that they can still qualify to access the SNAP program. There's already work requirements. This bill is not necessary and unneeded. And so the second part of that is the way that the sanctions work, they're going to increase them. So if someone is non-compliant in these new work requirements and the new work tracking details, a person will be kicked off the SNAP program for 3 months, and then they can reapply and get back on. And if they don't comply a second time, they'll be kicked off for 6 months of the program, and then can reapply and potentially get back on. But if they're non-compliant for a third time, they are permanently barred from the SNAP program forever. And when they say kicked off the program, it's that one individual person who is no longer able to access SNAP. But the way that in reality, when that works, right, one person in your SNAP also loses the SNAP benefit, that just decreases the amount of benefit that your entire family receives. And when the entire family is receiving less support, that means everybody is eating less, even the children in the family, right? It's not just that one person is not going to eat now for the rest of the month. That means everybody in the family, even the children who are living in that household, are going to eat less food. So another thing that this bill lays out, and this is solely based on the fiscal note, and the fiscal note is what talks about how much this bill is going to cost. So within the fiscal note, it says that what the state is going to do is it is going to create a mandatory employment and training program for everyone who's on SNAP. And so right on the face of that, it sounds fine, right? So that's the state of Missouri helping people find jobs, but it's not that simple. So instituting a mandatory program for individual on SNAP is extremely expensive and extremely staff intensive. So right now there's a voluntary employment program in the state, and what the state said in this fiscal note is that it helped about 1,145 people in this program this last year in 2021. And what it also states is that if this becomes a mandatory thing, over 65,000 people will have to be helped with this training and employment program. And what Legal Services of Eastern Missouri estimates is that will cost over $65 million just to implement this training program. The state of Missouri does not have that type of money in its budget to fund a program like that, nor does it have nearly amount of staff that are going to be needed to implement this sort of a program. It's just not feasible. It's not going to happen. And so with the Department of Social Services already overburdened and understaffed, with these new requirements and these new rules and programs that they want to institute, it's only going to lead to mistakes happening. And when mistakes happen, people get kicked off the program when they're not supposed to be kicked off the program, right? So either they're actually exempt, but the state doesn't know that, or the state doesn't record that correctly, and they get kicked off the program. And many times when someone gets kicked off the program, they think it's their own fault and they don't reapply. So that's only going to hurt families. It's only going to hurt children because of mistakes, have an understaffed Department of Social Services trying to implement these new rules. Mistakes are going to happen. Right now, without these new rules, the call center, which is how anyone who has a problem with their SNAP program, SNAP card, their SNAP account, the only way that folks can get help now is by calling in this call center. And currently right now, without these new regulations, the call center is dropping 60% of the calls that it receives. So over half the time, your call will be dropped without even being answered and getting to. And the average wait time is over 38 minutes before you even get to speak to someone if you do get on to the call center. And this is without the new rules and regulations. So that alone is a problem. And then finally, the department itself estimates that over 45,000 Missourians could face sanctions because of this new tracking policy. And that equates to about $7.7 million in SNAP benefits per month coming into the state of Missouri that goes to local grocery stores, into our local economy, and feeding hungry families. That's the department's own estimates in the fiscal note. So these are just 5 of the talking points that we hope you can use. I've put together a talking point kind of handout that we're going to put into the chat a little bit later so you can access all of this information in an easier format when you're actually making some phone calls to senators. But I wanted to talk through these to kind of explain it a little bit. It is a complicated bill. It's not very straightforward. I mean, there's a lot of aspects to it. So hopefully some of these points will make it a little bit clearer and easier for you to talk about. Trying to move this forward. Give me a second. There we go. So the next step you need to do is you need to figure out who your state senator is. You can also figure out who your state representative is because contacting them is also important. But the best way to do that, if you could go to senate.mo.gov, and on the top there, one of the tabs there is a link for a legislator lookup. I think it's going to be dropped into the chat where you can just click on that link directly and you can type in your street address and it will show you who your senator is. And that's the person we want you to focus on today. And once you have their information, what we're hoping that you can do here at the end of today's call is to call them up. And after you contact them, we're happy for you to call any other senator on the list and do this exact same way. But calling your senator is the most important because you are their constituents and they care mostly about what their constituents say, right? Because you are the ones who can elect them the next time an election happens. So it's your senator it's the most important to contact. So the 3 action steps that we hope that you will take today at the end of this call is that we will hope you will call your senator's office, you will email your senator, and then share some of these informational tweets in your Facebook, on your Twitter, on Instagram, any other social media outlets that you have, encouraging your friends and coworkers to do the exact same thing. I'm going to go back to the talking points here in just a minute so you can look at them one more time. We are hopeful that one of the aspects of our hour of action is we're going to have a legislator join us for our call and talk a little bit about why this bill is important to them. We're having Senator Jill Shoup join us today. She's been a staunch advocate against these bills and has spoken out on the Senate floor quite a bit on them. And I think she was planning on joining us around 12:30 because she ended up having an education committee hearing right now. And I was hopeful she was on. So let me see if she's joined.
I'm here.
Ah, wonderful. Thanks, Jill. So as I said, Senator Jill Shoup is a senator from St. Louis County, and she has spent many years on the floor of the Senate speaking out against bills just like this. She is an advocate within the Capitol and a supporter and a partner with us on this bill. And she's going to talk for just a few minutes about why this issue is important to her, why she thinks it's important to talk about it, and just how important it is to hear from constituents and how that helps them in their advocacy efforts on the floor of the Senate. So Jill, thank you so much, Senator, for joining us today. And I know it's busy down there right now. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Christine, for inviting me and for all the work that you guys do to help keep me informed and the rest of us up here. Because as you know, we're working on lots of different bills, but this is one that really tears at my heart. You know, even a little child can understand what it means to be hungry and how it changes things when you are not well fed and when you're focused on that lack of food in your belly as opposed to the other things that you can be doing, whether it's in school or as you get older, whether it's working outside of school. There is nothing more important than making sure that people have not only meals, but even nutritious meals. So this organization, plus the many food pantries and food banks, even around my community, which is one of in St. Louis County, is frankly has a lot of wealthy people and is a wealthy community. There are food banks because people are hungry and people have needs, and we need to make sure that we fulfill those needs. This bill really provides a choice, in my opinion, and the choice is: do we want to spend literally millions of dollars on trying to kick people off of food stamps? Or do we want to spend those same dollars trying to encourage people to eat, to take care of themselves and their families, to make sure that they're strong enough and healthy enough and fueled enough to go to school and do well, to work at jobs and do well? The money and the people it will take to put in place to make sure that there is compliance with this legislation, should it pass, is unconscionable. We are trying to work on more and better ways to make sure our food banks have more food available to the food pantry so the people in our communities can get what they need. There is nothing more basic to our existence than making sure we have food. And I've known this was, I would say, my first social justice issue from the time I was a little girl in second grade, when I learned that some people go to bed at night hungry. And I said, if I can ever do anything to change that, that's going to be my first job. And I actually dreamed at the time of taking a suitcase with me full of food to the people that are hungry. And when I first started serving in the House, I brought that suitcase with me to the legislature to remind me of why I was there and that there are people who are struggling just to have their basic necessities met. So we have a choice, and your legislator and people you know around the state, their legislators, need to hear from them. We need to know that you care deeply about this issue. You know, people who are struggling don't have a lobbyist necessarily that they can hire to go and work for them. So thank goodness that we have organizations like this and others that are willing to step up and stand up and help be the champions to help us learn to advocate. Christine, I know that you want to open it up for questions, so I'm going to pause and see if there are questions I can answer or address about how you approach the person who is supposed to be representing you.
Thanks, Senator. Does anybody have a question for Senator Shoup? I know she's super busy, so we'll take a couple questions and then we can move on with our agenda. Anyone?
If not, or Christine, if you see someone, interrupt me, but if not, let me say this. And I think a lot of you have reached out to your legislators before. I think Christine said to call, and I think that is really important, to call to the office. And even if you don't speak with the senator, leave a message, leave a detailed message about how they can get back to you. But I also think following that up with emails and other kinds of communication are really important. They need to hear from you, not just once. You know what, we hear from you once and maybe somebody sets that information aside, or maybe an assistant in the office addresses the question or answers the question. But when you start reminding these offices over and over about how important this issue is, hopefully it will give somebody the understanding that you mean business here. And again, if you have other people in your community that can reach out to your senator and your representative, and maybe even ask your representative to reach out to that senator, to make sure that when this comes to the Senate floor, senators are prepared with your ideas, your vision for what it looks like going forward and how it benefits their communities to make sure people get fed, as opposed to the harm it does to try to force somebody to fit into a mold of what we think it should look like. Of course, we want everyone who can to work. Of course we do. But you got to start with first things first, right? We have to have people who aren't hungry. You can't look for a job and do a job well if you haven't had your belly full and you haven't had your nutrition and the fuel that allows you to think and work.
One of the things I mentioned at the beginning of the call, Senator, was that I would imagine that quite a few of the folks on this call today probably have senators who probably agree with them on this, right? They're the ones who have the senators who are against this. But I recommended that they also contact them, those senators, even if they know that they agree with them, right? That they would help you when you speak up on the floor, that I had this many constituents reach out to me about this bill, that
right.
Even if you're supportive of their issue, to still contact them, right?
Right. So it lets me know a couple of things. Yes, it does give me that tool of being able to say, look, even people in my community who know I'm supportive care about this, and this is how many reached out to me. But also it allows me to know that you have my back, that there is somebody out there in my community that cares, that does care deeply about this issue, that it's not just me out there on my own little island. So yes, reach out to the people that represent you, the people who represent you, whether they're on your side with this issue or whether they need some more education from you about what it means for people in your community to be fed.
Wonderful. Anybody have a question for the senator? All right, thank you so much, Senator. We really appreciate your dedication, and hopefully we won't need your filibuster and your speaking out on this bill in the Senate. Hopefully it won't even get that far, but we know if it does, that we can count on you to stand Absolutely. Up and speak up for a long time.
Yes, and it is on the calendar, as are a lot of other things that I disagree with. So we'll be watching for it, and always feel welcome even to email or text your senators when we're on the floor debating these issues. So you can, again, you're not doing it too much. The more you do it, the more we understand how passionate you are about the issue. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks
and
for your work.
Know that we'll be there to support you. Thank you.
Thank you. Talk to you later.
All right, on that note, I'm gonna bring up the talking points one more time that we went through. And this is the time that we are going to ask you to call and email your senators right now, in these last 15 or 20 minutes that we have on this time. And what we're doing is, when you call, they're probably not going to be available, right? Senators and reps are super busy, especially during session, but it can't hurt to ask. I've called a couple of different times, and I remember one time the senator actually answered his own phone, and I was definitely taken aback by that, because that was not usual. But you should definitely ask and see if they're available. You never know, they may be, and you might be able to directly talk with them. But most likely you're going to be speaking with a chief of staff or a legislative assistant. But you can share all of these talking points with them and leave that message for your senator about this information. So call them and talk to them about these issues with these talking points. You're just wanting them to know that you're asking them to vote against Senate Bill 138 when it comes to the floor of the Senate. And then I think in the chat, we have that link to that document where I also have a sample script that you can use for not only when you call, but also when you email. You can change it up and add your own inflections or your own talking points, but this is just a basic script that you can use when you're doing all of those steps towards your senator. And then I'm also going to stay on the Zoom for the next 15 or 20 minutes to take any questions that you have, to hear any feedback that you get when you contact your senators. And you're more than welcome to stay on the Zoom and just mute yourself and go ahead and make those calls or emails right now. But you're also more than welcome to just drop off and email me or let me know what you learn after the fact. My email is christine@empowermissouri.org. So feel free to reach out to me with any information that you gather with the actions that you're happening. And then just again, we want to encourage you to join us for our Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday hours of action, same time and same link. And then another reminder that we organize a food security coalition, and that happens in a bi-weekly meeting. So if you learn something on this call and you want to get more involved in our food security coalition, our next one will be this Friday at 9 a.m. And that information can be found on our website. You can register for that through the coalitions tab that's on our website. So if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take those now as well. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining us today. And we hope that you can take some action and we can get this bill stopped.